Your tomato plants look perfect. The leaves are lush and green. Then you notice a dark, leathery circle forming on the bottom of your first ripening fruit. You assume it is a fungus and spray the plant with expensive chemicals. The fruit keeps rotting. You have just wasted money on a treatment that does not address the actual cause of the damage. In this video, I am breaking down 3 specific watering mistakes that are destroying tomato yields across the country right now. We will look at why your plants are failing even when you think you are giving them enough water. The second problem is the most common for gardeners using containers or raised beds, and it is usually the reason your plants wilt despite the soil looking wet on top. By the end of this, you will have a clear, data-driven plan to keep your plants productive through the hottest weeks of the season. Gardening in the United States has changed significantly over the last 20 years. According to USDA and NOAA data, average summer temperatures are rising and rainfall patterns have become more erratic. This matters because a tomato plant is roughly 90% water. It uses that water for structure, cooling, and nutrient transport. In the past, you could get away with a casual watering schedule. Today, high heat events and low humidity can cause a plant to lose moisture faster than its roots can pull it from the soil. If you do not manage your soil moisture with precision, the plant will prioritize its own survival over producing fruit. This results in smaller harvests, stunted growth, and physical damage to the tomatoes you worked hard to grow. If you do nothing, your plants will likely survive the summer, but they will stop producing edible fruit until the weather breaks in the fall. Everything in this video is based on established horticultural research and documented gardening science. For specific regional advice, always consult your local agricultural extension office. Problem 1. Blossom end rot caused by inconsistent moisture cycles. This is perhaps the most misunderstood issue in a home garden. Most people are told it is a calcium deficiency in the soil. While it involves calcium, the actual problem is how water moves through the plant. What it looks like. You will see a small, water-soaked spot on the blossom end of the tomato, which is the side opposite the stem. As the tomato grows, this spot expands into a large, dark brown or black patch. The area feels like leather and is sunken into the fruit. It usually appears on the first few clusters of tomatoes, while the rest of the plant looks completely healthy. Why it happens. Calcium is an immobile nutrient. Unlike nitrogen or potassium, which a plant can move from old leaves to new growth, calcium stays where it is first delivered. It travels through the plant's plumbing system, called the xylem, only when water is moving from the roots to the leaves. When you let your soil get bone dry and then soak it with a hose, you disrupt this flow. During the dry period, the plant cannot pull calcium from the dirt. The cells at the bottom of the developing fruit fail to form properly because they lack the calcium needed for strong cell walls. When you finally water, the plant recovers, but the damage to those specific cells is already permanent. The tissue collapses and turns black. Here's exactly what you can do. 1. Install a simple moisture meter or use the finger test. The top 2 inches of soil should never feel dusty or dry to the touch. 2. Apply a 3-inch layer of organic mulch, such as straw or wood chips, around the base of the plant. This prevents the top layer of soil from drying out through evaporation. 3. Set a consistent watering schedule. It is better to give the plant a moderate amount of water every single morning than a massive amount of water once every 3 days. 4. Stop adding calcium tums or crushed eggshells to the soil. Most garden soils already have plenty of calcium. Your plant just needs a steady stream of water to pick it up. Think of it like a delivery truck on a highway. The calcium is the package, and the water is the fuel. If the truck runs out of gas halfway to the destination, the package never gets delivered. Even if you fill the tank later, the delivery is already late, and the customer, in this case your tomato, has already suffered. Once you have stabilized your watering schedule, you need to make sure the water is actually reaching the roots.
Problem 2. Soil hydrophobia in peat-based or organic mixes. This is a physical change in the soil itself that prevents it from doing its job. It is extremely common in raised beds and containers that contain a lot of peat moss or compost. What it looks like. You water your plant until you see a puddle on the surface or water running out of the bottom of the pot. You assume the plant is satisfied. However, if you stick your finger 2 inches into the dirt, the soil is completely dry and powdery. Your plants continue to wilt in the afternoon even though you watered them that morning. Why it happens. Many modern potting mixes use peat moss because it is lightweight and holds water well once it is wet. However, if peat moss or certain types of organic matter dry out completely, they develop a waxy chemical coating. This coating actually repels water. Instead of soaking into the soil, the water sits on top or finds a small crack along the edge of the container and runs straight through without ever touching the roots. This is called hydrophobia. You are essentially pouring water on a rain jacket. The plant is starving for moisture while you are standing there with a hose. Exactly what to do. 1. Use a low and slow watering method. Instead of a high-pressure spray, use a drip line or a very slow trickle from the hose. This gives the water time to break the surface tension. 2. If you are using containers, try bottom watering. Place the pot in a tray of water for 30 minutes. Capillary action will pull the moisture upward, which is more effective at rehydrating hydrophobic soil than top watering. 3. Apply a very small amount of natural, unscented Castile soap to your watering can. 1 or 2 drops per gallon acts as a wetting agent. It breaks the surface tension and allows the water to soak into the waxy soil particles. 4. Never let your soil reach the point of being dusty. Once it reaches that stage, you will have to work twice as hard to get it wet again. This is exactly like a brand new kitchen sponge that has dried out into a hard brick. If you put it under a fast-running faucet, the water just bounces off. You have to squeeze it and let it sit in a shallow puddle for a minute before it becomes soft and absorbent again. Your soil is that sponge. All 3 of these problems have one thing in common. They are responses to environmental stress the plant cannot communicate clearly. The symptoms look like nutrient problems, watering problems, or disease. They are not. They are the plant operating exactly as designed under conditions it was not built for. In a world with higher temperatures and faster evaporation, you cannot rely on the plant to tell you when it is thirsty. By the time it wilts, it has already stopped growing and producing fruit. Fix the soil conditions and the water delivery system, not the plant itself. Problem 3. Thermal root stress in high heat environments. This is a biological shutdown that happens when the ground gets too hot, regardless of how much water is present. What it looks like. Your tomato plants look limp and wilted in the late afternoon, even if the soil is damp. By the next morning, they look perfectly fine again. You might notice the leaves curling upward or the edges turning brown and crispy. This is often mistaken for a lack of water, leading gardeners to overwater, which then causes root rot. Why it happens. Plants stay cool through a process called transpiration. They pull water from the roots and release it through tiny holes in the leaves called stomata. This works like human sweating. However, if the soil temperature rises above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the roots begin to struggle. At high temperatures, root respiration increases, which uses up the plant's energy reserves. Eventually, the roots cannot keep up with the water demand from the leaves. The plant shuts its stomata to prevent itself from drying out. When the stomata close, the plant can no longer cool itself or take in carbon dioxide for growth. It wilts as a defense mechanism, not necessarily because the soil is dry, but because the internal cooling system has been overwhelmed by the heat. Here's exactly what to do. 1. Use light-colored mulch. Dark wood chips or black plastic absorb heat and transfer it into the root zone. White clover, straw, or even a light-colored sheet can keep soil temperatures up to 10 degrees cooler. 2. Water in the early morning, before 8 a.m. This cools the soil before the sun reaches its peak and ensures the plant has a full reservoir of water before the heat stress begins. 3. In extremely hot climates, provide afternoon shade. Using a 30% shade cloth between noon and 4 p.m. can lower the ambient temperature enough to keep the plant's cooling system functional. 4. Do not water in the middle of the afternoon if the plant is wilting but the soil is wet. Adding more water to hot, wet soil can actually cook the roots and lead to fungal infections. One practical example. Think of a person wearing a heavy coat while running a race in the middle of July. They are drinking plenty of water, but they are still overheating because they cannot shed the heat fast enough. The water helps, but it doesn't solve the core problem of the external temperature. You need to take the coat off, which for a plant means cooling the soil and providing shade. To prevent these issues from starting, follow this 3-point framework. First, always check the soil moisture with a physical probe before you water. Do not guess based on the appearance of the leaves. Second, maintain a thick layer of mulch year-round to protect the soil from both evaporation and heat. Third, prioritize morning watering to align with the plant's natural biological clock. These 3 steps create a stable environment that allows the plant to focus on fruit production rather than survival. Watering tomatoes is not about the amount of water you use, but the consistency and timing of the delivery. By stabilizing your soil moisture and protecting the roots from heat, you allow the plant to move nutrients properly and stay cool. Go outside today and check your mulch depth. If it is less than 2 inches, add more. Now you know exactly what to do. What is the biggest challenge you have faced with your tomato harvest this year? If this solves a problem you've been dealing with, subscribe. New gardening videos every week, all factual, all practical. Drop your specific plant problem in the comments, and I will cover it in an upcoming video.